Welcome everyone. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking to you about accessing your computer with your eyes. So there's quite a lot of information to go through today. The agenda for today is going through the new TD Pilot, the iOS device for eye gaze users, TD Control, the software for Windows for accessing your computer, and also we're going to touch on a bit of message banking as well. So hopefully it won't be too information heavy for some people. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, do pop them into the Q&A section on the left hand side. If you're using a mobile phone, it might be down on the bottom of your screen. But as I said, if you have any questions, just pop them into the message bar. There will be myself, obviously, I'm presenting today, and I've got Connor and Ashita in the meeting as well today. So they might be able to answer some questions during the webinar as well, if you have them during the webinar, and I can always come back to them at the end of the webinar as well. Okay. So we get started there now. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Michael Brazel, and I'm a solutions consultant at Safecare Technologies. I've been with the company for just a little over 4 years now, and I also offer the assistive technology support as well to individuals around Ireland as well. So I can see from the attendees, there is a mix of new people and also people, familiar names I can see. So I suppose I'll introduce the company as well and what we do. So ourselves, Safecare Technologies, we provide AAC solutions. We provide assistive technology solutions such as switches and joysticks and so on and so forth. We provide multi-sensory rooms, the SHX system, which is a fully immersive sensory room system. We supply cognitive products as well as scheduling products, and also we work with environmental control as well, so controlling windows, doors, blinds as well. So these are just some of the companies that we do work with currently. So we work with Readapt as well, providing some mounting solutions, wheelchair mounts, floor mounts, table mounts, and so on and so forth. We work with Praetorian and AbleNet for switches and joysticks. We work with Abelia for scheduling and cognitive products, also a bit of environmental control as well, and BJ Live as well, which are now renamed to Quinera, and we work with them for the multisensory room and also for some environmental control products as well. Okay. So yeah, we'll get started with today's webinar. So I'll start off with the TD Pilot. I'll just go through the TD Pilot to show you a few features of this particular device, and hopefully it won't be too much information. Just touch on the softwares that are on the device as well, and so on and so forth. And then we move on to the other areas as well. So this is the new TD Pilot. Now, I don't actually have one physically to show you, but obviously I can send you on links after the webinar as well. We'll send you on a follow-up email with some of the links to the devices as well. I forgot to actually mention as well earlier that if you want as well, if you find you might have a client that might use the TD Pilot, might benefit that person, then we can always do an assessment if you like, and the device as well is also available for trials as well. So the TD Pilot is an eye gaze-enabled iOS-based speech-generating device for all communicators, from children to adults, and it's designed to empower people with conditions such as ALS, so spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy, and basically just helps to communicate and use the iOS environment with integrated eye gaze. So we're all used to seeing, Windows devices and so on and so forth as our eye gaze devices, but recently enough now we have this iOS device. I suppose through popular demand, people are always asking, when is there going to be an iOS eye gaze device? Well, now there is, and Tobii Dynavox have developed this one in conjunction with Apple. Okay, so basically being able to communicate on a familiar platform is an important consideration for success in using a device for augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC. And that's why Tobii Dynavox is happy to offer this TD Pilot. It's the eye gaze-enabled iPad iOS speech-generating device that enables communication and access the iOS environment for people with disabilities via eye gaze. Just like other AAC communicators, eye gaze users can now choose the digital ecosystem, whether that's iOS or PC. So now we can actually access this massive world of apps that are available on the iOS device. So the TD Pilot was designed for those that are dedicated iOS users who require an alternative way to communicate and require eye gaze to access the communication system. TD Pilot was built using the power of Tobii Dynavox eye tracking. So we're all familiar as well with the eye trackers that are already available on the actual Tobii Dynavox devices. So it will support communicators using all lighting conditions, no matter what, if it is outside or even if it's inside as well. So it was built with powerful speakers as well and a partner window so that our communicators can be heard and can communicate face to face. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, it was built with those powerful speakers, and as you can see from here, it's also got the partner window as well. And before we take a deep dive into the specifics of that TD Pilot, just let me basically just bear with me now. We'll just go on here actually. So as I mentioned, this was made in conjunction with Apple. So now you see there is a world of apps that basically we can access. So Tobii Dynavox has worked strongly with Apple for a long time to support them in integrating eye gaze into their assistive touch functionality. Apple is building out support for all Apple certified eye trackers to take advantage of assistive touch. So the assistive touch, which I'll bring to your attention now in a second as well, is the new way of accessing the device. So just by looking at a simple button on the right-hand side, the eye gaze user is now able to access that device. And as you can see, they're able to access a world of apps here now. So no matter what the app is on the eye gaze device, on the iOS device, they're able to actually access those apps using their eye gaze and using specific gestures to actually access the device. Okay, so as I mentioned, Apple have made this in conjunction with Tobii Dynavox. So it does have the Made for iPad logo on it as well, which is great. So you might see maybe other kind of third-party products, but this particular one, Tobii have worked with Apple closely, and it has the Made for Apple logo on it as well. So in particular, you see here now, this is the full iPad iOS access. So we have full access to iPad apps, content and services, as I mentioned. It's native eye gaze integration in Assistive Touch, and I'll go into the eye gaze side of things in a little bit more in a while. And it's also, as I mentioned, got the Made for iPad certified eye tracker as well. Okay, so even the eye gaze user has access to the iPad apps as well and can download their apps as well. Okay, so just going to show you this here now. This is just a 360 tour of the device. So as you can see here now, obviously I don't have the physical product, but basically as you can see here now, I'll just go back to show you again, just from front to back. Here we have it again. So the size, you can see it's quite sleek, it's quite thin. It's got a little stand at the back as well. So if you want to raise it up, it's got the speakers at the back and the partner window as I showed you earlier as well. Okay. So the iPad itself, the TD Pilot, offers a 12.9-inch display, which provides a large display area for viewing both apps and your communication software, whether it's sitting on a table or mounted on a wheelchair mount, floor mount, or so on and so forth. It offers front-facing camera, which can be, of course, take pictures as well for the perfect selfie, or can be set up with a Face ID within the settings to allow touch-free unlocking of the device. So that's perfect for that security as well. For example, if you have banking apps, you have that security then as well. So the TD Pilot comes with a pre-installed case for protection and durability. TD Pilot was built on world-class Tobii Dynavox tracking technology. Okay, using the Tobii Dynavox eye tracker as well, as you can see is highlighted. It provides outdoor eye tracking as well as indoor eye tracking functionality, superior accuracy and precision across the entire population, including those requiring glasses as well. So it does work with glasses too. The TD Pilot also is the first ever Made for iPad, as I mentioned, or Made for iOS approved eye tracker. This provides natively integrated eye tracking capabilities through Assistive Touch, the iOS environment, and full region-based eye gaze interaction in TD apps, which we'll discuss as well in a second. As I mentioned, I'll discuss those. Okay, it only weighs 2 kg. And it has up to 10 hours battery life as well. So it has a lot longer battery life as well than just the standard iPad on its own, because it's got the TD Pilot case built into it. It now has a longer battery life for the eye gaze user. Okay, so they're just some of the areas, as I mentioned, that is covered: the weight, the protective case, the battery life, the display, and the eye tracker. Okay, so from the right-hand side as well, we'll see the device itself. You've got the USB-C to USB-C connections, okay, cable, which connects the operating system of the TD Pilot base, providing the eye tracking capabilities and power. So the TD Pilot also offers, sorry, just go back there now, it also offers switch ports for eye gaze with switch activation as well. So you'll see the arrow on the right hand side facing down to the black rubber area as well. Within there as well, we've got the switch ports as well. So if you have that switch user, you can use switches, or you can use eye gaze, or you can even combine both access methods as well. If you were to use, for example, switch to eye gaze to look and switch to select, we can do that also. Okay. So this is the back of the device, and on the back of the device, you'll see we've got the rear-facing camera. Earlier, I showed you the front-facing camera. We've also got the partner window at the back. So for that communicator, if we're using apps like TD Snap or TD Talk, which I'll talk about as well in a while, we can use those apps, and as we communicate from the front of the device, the person on the actual back of the device can see us speaking, so we don't have to lean over their shoulders to see what they're writing or anything. We can see from the partner window what the text is that is being displayed. It's also got the power and track status button. So that particular power button at the back, you will see here on the right hand side, will turn on the device itself. That's the TD Pilot device. And over on the left hand side, we've got the I button. So that's basically our track status button. So that's a quick button to bring up our track status, and then we're able to see our positioning and if we need to do a new calibration or anything like that. You've got that mounting plate at the rear of the device as well. So whether we're mounting to a floor mount, a table mount, a wheelchair mount, so on and so forth, we've got that mounting plate ready and already installed on the device to connect to that device or to the mount. The powerful speaker, so much like what you might have seen in other eye tracking devices from Tobii Dynavox, such as the I series or the SC iLight, for example, we have got the rear-facing speakers that will amplify the sound for us as well. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, you've got that adjustable stand as well. So if you were just mounting it on a table, for example, you've got that adjustable stand to tilt the device forward or back, or just give it a little bit of height as well. Okay, and then from the left-hand side of the device, you will see there's the charging port. So in the device itself, there's now only one charging port. So it's not like you have a charging port for the TD Pilot and one for the one for the iPad. You now have one charging port for both devices that will charge up both parts of your device. Okay, you've also got a headphone jack as well on that as well. So if you want more privacy and you want to just be able to maybe watch your TV shows or just even, listen to music, for example, we can put in the headphones and then we can listen to that ourselves. So no one else has to listen to the sound as well. Also as well, the TD Pilot is future ready. So we all know that Apple like to change the size of their devices quite regularly. So, it might change slightly, maybe it was, 12.9, it could be 12.8 or even 13 inch, coming down the line. So you never really know what the next size is going to be until Apple releases it. So the actual device itself is future ready. So you'll see on the image on the right-hand side, we've got basically the case of the TD Pilot. So that particular part is future ready, meaning that can actually be just taken off, and then when the new device comes out, there will be a new mold made, and that just clips into the iPad and onto the device again. So then you don't have to change your whole device. You only have to change your iPad if you want to get the new iPad, and then you just put the new case on, the new cover on your case as well. Okay. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about the iPad, or the apps and the access of the device itself. Just kind of briefly go over some of them, okay? Mainly kind of focusing on the feature on the device, but I'll just kind of touch on the two main apps that are on the device as well, okay? So from this particular image that you're seeing here now, the first one that pops up is TD Talk. TD Talk is the new text-based communicator on the TD Pilot. So with that particular one, it's a keyboard, and I can show you a few images of that in a while, and that's basically the new communicator on the TD Pilot. We've also got TD Snap, which most of you might be familiar with. TD Snap being your symbol-based, your text-based, and also the aphasia-based page sets as well on TD Snap. The third image on the left-hand side, that's your Copilot. So we might be used to seeing eye tracking settings on like the I series, or again the SC iLight, or even gaze point, as you might have seen before as well, or gaze interaction settings, the previous versions. This new software on the TD Pilot is called Copilot, and this is your calibration and your positioning tool, basically. And then finally, we've got the Assistive Touch button. And the Assistive Touch button is that button that will allow us to be able to access the computer and be able to surf, the web, go on to apps, for example, go on to different games, and go on to music, or go on to Netflix even as well. Okay. So also as well with the TD Pilot, The TD Pilot itself has, as I mentioned, that Assistive Touch button. And that Assistive Touch button then basically allows you to search around the screen. So basically, when you're looking at that, you have to have good accuracy to be able to, I suppose, view and particular areas of the device. Now, there's also what we call region-based interaction. And region-based interaction is available when we access things like TD Snap, TD Talk, or any other Tobii Dynavox devices. So region-based interaction is only exclusive to Tobii Dynavox products on the iOS devices, on the iOS platform. And again, I'll try to show you some of that as well in a while. But basically, it assigns a larger target area to the buttons. It reads gaze anywhere within the target. So what will happen, it's kind of like a magnet. And when we look at a particular area of, a communication software page, if we're looking at I or want, what happens is when we're in that particular button, it'll pull it to the center and it'll select that button for us. So it provides that extra accuracy for us. It also improves precision, as I mentioned, and accuracy, and it reduces the effort and the stress as well of having to focus on a specific area. For example, if you're on the internet and you're looking for a tiny link, you wouldn't have to worry about that in the case of, the communication softwares, because you have that region-based interaction. Okay, so using eye gaze with iOS basically. So with the TD Pilot, we also have the ability to utilize eye gaze in the iPad iOS environment. This experience within the iPad iOS environment will look and feel different compared to TD communication apps, as I mentioned, the region-based, because of the lack of region-based interaction. Okay, so when you are in the iPad iOS environment, you are using eye gaze with the Assistive Touch button, as I mentioned. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a quick video on that, just to demonstrate what the Assistive Touch will look like. Okay, so you'll see the Assistive Touch. As we're moving around here, we're selecting our app. Now, in this particular case, we're going into TD Talk, and you'll see it switches to region-based. So you'll see the region-based is slightly different. We no longer have that circle when we're looking around, okay?
Hi, my name is Michael.
Okay. Just pause that there now. And move on. Okay. So the Assistive Touch then, it basically enabled through iPad iOS settings. So again, I'll show you more of that in a second. We can complete taps, basically scroll, long hold gestures with eye gaze. So with the actual Assistive Touch, what we would need to do is we need to basically replicate what we would do if we were using gestures. So gestures are basically what we do when we're using an iPad. So is it swiping up to close an app when we're in, the main view of all our apps? Is it, scrolling down through a page, for example? Or is it even, sliding right or sliding left to go to another page on your iPad screen? So these are gestures that we need to actually create within the actual device for the eye gaze user to be able to just look at that button and then that action is performed. Okay, so when we first get an eye gaze device or the TD Pilot, we'll need to learn in those gestures. Once those gestures are learned in, the eye gaze user is then able to actually, use the device, and just by looking at the device or looking at that particular button, it'll perform that gesture for us. Okay, so this is just kind of a look again at that Assistive Touch button. You'll see it's the kind of gray circle. So again, like you saw in the video a second ago, it could be anywhere on the screen. We can move that as well. So in this particular instance here, you're seeing it on the bottom right-hand corner, but we can move that anywhere in the screen as well. And if we're actually on, say, for example, a web page, the eye gaze user as well, if they're looking at a web page and they see that that Assistive Touch button is in the way of maybe a scroll down arrow or in the way of text, we can look at that button, we can move it to a different area in the screen, and then we can actually focus on that previous area we're trying to read, and then we can always move it back again later on if we wanted to. Okay, so it's completely movable as well. The pointer then, as you saw there a while ago as well, selecting the app like TD Talk, you'll see there's a dwell on the pointer. So we can adjust that dwell as well. So we can reduce or increase the speed of that dwell depending as well. So some eye gaze users might need a longer dwell, some might need a shorter dwell if if they're quite fast using the eye gaze itself. And then this is just a quick look at the menu. So again, we'll see the menu in more detail again in a second, but from this particular screen here now, we can see that we can resume the dwell or pause the dwell. So if the eye gaze user is reading a page, for example, we might want to pause the dwell so that we can read the page and then come back to the Assistive Touch in a while and back and resume that dwell again. We can open up the app switcher if we want to change from one app to another. So you might have had multiple apps open up. We can go back to the other one, for example. We can put in custom gestures, as you can see from the left-hand side, move menu, that's just moving your assistive button, for example, or even just looking at the home button to bring us back home. And then even down the bottom right, looking at scroll, if we're scrolling left, scrolling right, scrolling up on a page, or scrolling down on a page as well. Okay, so here again is just a view of that particular page. Again, I'll go down here now just to show you another video. Okay, so this is basically this video itself. It's just going into the menu. As you saw there, we went into the menu, clicked on home, we went back in. We're looking around the screen. So you'll see you have the pointer and you'll see there's a dwell happening. So if I focus on something long enough, like the home button there, the dwell, then we'll select that. We can go into our social media apps here, for example, if we have different social media apps. Here we've got Twitter, we've opened up. We can then have a look at the home again. We can look at scroll and we can scroll down. So we can actually go to the next post that might be on Twitter. So we just focus at the bottom, it scrolls down to the next post then for us. We can read that again if we like, go back into scroll again, scrolling down again to the next post, looking at the area and scrolling down again. Okay, so just like that, we're able to scroll into the different, posts that are on Twitter, for example, clicking on home to go back to the home menu. And then we're going to go back home again, I think. Yep, so back home again to the home screen again. So we're going out of social media. We might now want to go into our interests and our hobbies, for example. So maybe we have someone who's interested in looking at flights, tracking all the different flights around the world or even just in Cork. Here we've got Cork Airport and we want to see what type of flights might be landing or taking off, for example. And here we can see in real time then as well. So that gives that eye gaze user that freedom to maybe something that they really enjoyed before, that hobby, and they can actually look at that again. And here we have the app switcher, and we can open up a different app. Go back to Twitter if we want to go back to Twitter. Okay. So I'll just pause that one there because it's quite long. Okay. So as I mentioned there a while ago, there is two different types of eye gaze when you're actually using the TD Pilot. We've got the region-based interaction and the assistive touch. So you'll see here that the red circle represents the area where a selection can take place, and that's in the region-based interaction. So region interaction works like a magnet, as I mentioned. When you get to the edge of the region, it pulls your cursor or pointer to the center of that target. So like what I was mentioning, when you're in a communication software like TD Snap or like TD Talk, when you're looking at a specific button, you don't necessarily have to be in the center. You could be at the corners of that button. And like a magnet, it's going to pull your cursor into the center and select that particular one. Whereas the assistive touch then requires a little bit more stability and accuracy. So you have more of your cursor all the way to the target. You have to move your cursor, more of the way to the target and keep your eyes steady until the dwell selection is completed. So like that there, the dwell, as I mentioned, that's where you kind of have to adjust your dwell, whether you want it fast or slow, because obviously the faster it is, the faster it will select your particular option that you want to select. And then again, it's your accuracy. So there's a combination of where your accuracy and your pointing your dwell as well. Okay. So you'll see here, I'll just demonstrate go back here now. So this is basically your region interaction. So where it's kind of had it on the red and pulled it into the center, and the assistive touch is more getting in the center and focusing on that particular aspect. Okay. So that is the TD Pilot pretty much in a nutshell. Now, there is a lot to it, I suppose, in a sense. So as I mentioned, if anyone has any questions about the TD Pilot, I'm happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. But also, as I mentioned, if you have put anything into the Q&A section, Connor and Ishita are there to answer your questions. And as I mentioned, if anyone wants to kind of maybe see the device in more detail, we are running more webinars on the TD Pilot in the future. And we'll also be, we also, as I mentioned, can do assessments with the device if you think maybe you have a client who might benefit from this device, or even as well, as I mentioned, we can do trials of the device as well after assessments as well. So as you can see, the TD Pilot is a speech generating device, as I mentioned, combining the Tobii Dynavox world-class eye tracking technology and outstanding communication apps within the Access as well. Okay, so just, I suppose, in a nutshell, just to go back on the key features that I talked about here today, the TD Pilot, as we mentioned, it's made for iPad label on it as well. So Tobii and Apple work together to create this particular one. It's a iPad iOS again, so it's opening up that world of iOS to eye gaze users as well. So as we were only previously kind of maybe used to, using Windows devices, now for those people who use iPads all their lives, maybe someone who has progressive motor neuron disease, for example, now they're able to, continue using their iPad, but now with iOS, or eye gaze, if now they are eye gaze users. The device itself has the partner window at the back for the communication. It's got that battery life of 10 hours plus. It's got the new IS5 TD eye tracker as well. So that is the brand new eye tracker, which is both indoor and outdoor eye tracking. And it also has the TD Talk and TD Snap software as well available on that device as well. So I'll show you a little bit more about the TD Talk in a while. I suppose you're mainly familiar with the TD Snap software. Just going back on the technical specifications again, the device itself is a 12.9-inch device. It only weighs 2 kgs. As I mentioned, it has that IS5 TD tracker. It's got the battery life and an IP rating as well of 54. Now, all these slides as well, we will make them available as well at the end of the webinar. So once the webinar is over, we will send you a follow-up email with all the details and the recording of the webinar as well. Okay, so moving on to TD Control. So TD Control is a software that is available on Windows devices. So for example, the i series, or if you're just buying the eye tracker on its own and you're attaching it to a Windows device, you get this TD Control software. And TD Control software allows us to access your computer. So it allows us, again, to be able to go onto the internet, go onto YouTube, basically be able to have freedom to go onto Microsoft applications like Office, for example. You might want to write up a Word document and things like that. So the actual device, or this software, allows you to be able to access your computer and not just your softwares like your TD Snap, Communicator 5, or TD Talk, for example. Okay, so with this particular software, you can interact with and control your computer via eye tracking settings, as I mentioned. It's designed for people with conditions such as cerebral palsy, motor neurons, spinal cord injury, who cannot use their hands but want full independent use of their computer. And with this software, we can navigate and control the Windows environment in a natural way. We can also stay connected via email and social media and much more. So within this particular software, much like what you saw with the actual, I suppose, the Assistive Touch on the TD Pilot, you also have this particular trace. And again, your trace on your TD Control allows you to navigate around your screen. And then you'll see on the right-hand side, we've got the activation. So there's the trace, the activator, and the off-screen menu. So if I was to look below the screen, I have an off-screen menu where I can actually select my options like settings, quick calibrations, and things like that. The activator is the button that allows me to select if I'm going to left click, right click, and so on and so forth. So my trace is where I view, and then I can open up my interaction menu with my trace once I activate. And my interaction menu is basically my next step. So what it does, for example, is that if I'm looking at a desktop screen of a Windows device, as we might be familiar with, when I look at that, it allows me then to say, okay, what is my next step? Is it going to be double click, left click, right click, click and drag, scroll, open the keyboard to type, for example, or even adjust the target? So adjusting the target is basically, for example, if I select a particular icon, but I'm not accurate and I don't hit that icon correctly, I can adjust my target again, and then I'm able to select it better. So that's what the actual target does again. And what I suppose in relation to this webinar as well, I don't actually have a video on this particular software, but if anyone wants to kind of see this in more detail again for a Windows device, again, we are running more webinars on this particular software. And again, we can go in more detail with that in the future. So keep an eye on our emails as we will be running these webinars. And also, again, we do assessments and we do trials. So if you do want to access that for an assessment or a trial, we can also do that as well. So this is our off-screen menu then. And our off-screen menu then will allow us, as I mentioned, to access our settings, do a quick calibration. If we wanted to copy and paste an item as well, we can do that on this particular screen as well. And we can also do things like adjusting our our activation. So for example, our dwell, we might need to adjust our dwell, make it faster or slower, and so on and so forth. And that's done in all these settings as well. So here, as I mentioned, you can do continuous left click. If you're someone who wants to just use the one function to left click continuously, we can put the device to sleep if we want to put the device to sleep as well. And we can even do a quick calibration. So the eye gaze user has that ability. So we're not relying on someone else to come along and open these options for us. The eye gaze user is able to actually open these options and do it for themselves. Okay. In the computer control settings as well, we've also got things like activation, as I mentioned, calibration, keyboard in general. And this is just where we can change those settings around. For example, we might want to change the activation. We might want to make this circle that we actually look at, that trace I mentioned earlier, we might want to make that darker so we can see it more clearly, for example, or even smaller so it's not as, prominent on the screen itself. The calibration, again, we can, do a quick calibration for our eyes. We can change the format of the keyboard, and just in general settings as well on computer control as well. So that is the TD Control software as well in a nutshell. And again, as I mentioned, we are happy to answer questions on that as well afterwards if you like. And finally, I just want to show you the message banking. So we'll talk about message banking more or less. So message banking is available on all the softwares, TD Snap, TD Talk, and also Communicator 5 as well. So for message banking, for anyone who has progressive conditions such as motor neuron disease, we might need to message bank just in case we do lose our voice down the line. So we can do that using particular apps, especially Acapella. Okay, so again, I'll show you about Acapella in a while, and I'll direct you to, I think there's webinars, and there's some resources as well I'm going to show you as well on our website. So going into message banking, it can be done in TD Snap, and this can be done in any of the page sets. So whether someone is using a symbol-based page set like Core First, text-based page set, or even the aphasia-based page set on TD Snap, they can use the message banking system on that. It's available on iOS and Windows as well, the TD Snap, so that opens up that access to both iOS and Windows users. It's also available on Communicator 5 in the different areas like fast word prediction, the dwell-free keyboard. If you're using emails and even phone access as well, you can use the message banking for that. The Communicator 5 software is available on Windows. And this is a particular, I suppose, snapshot of the myToby Dynavox account. So when message banking, there's actually a few steps to it. So if anyone is considering message banking, I would advise just maybe get in contact with ourselves, and we can talk you through how to actually do the message banking. But I just want to show you a quick snapshot of the particular, area where we store our messages. So just going back to the area of where we store our messages, the keynote to, I suppose, mention here is that this particular feature is absolutely free on the myToby Dynavox section, okay? So if we just wanted to bank our own messages, keep them on the myToby Dynavox and transfer them over to the software, we can do that, okay? And we can transfer them over to TD Snap, we can transfer them over, as I mentioned, TD Talk, we can even transfer them over to Communicator 5 as well. So it's completely free to store these messages here on the myToby Dynavox section, and then we can transfer them over onto the softwares themselves. There is other applications like my own voice by Acapella. There is a small charge to that particular one, but we can store our messages on that particular software as well. And we can even record our own voices as well. So sorry, apologies, my Acapella, recording our own voice onto that, and that's going to record our particular voice for the device as well. So there's two ways of doing it. There's the voice banking and the message banking, okay? So within the message banking here on this particular software, on myToby Dynavox, you'll see we've got the title, we've got the text, confidence, recording, and tags, okay? So when we record messages, they upload here. And then what will happen is the system will kind of listen to what the message is, and it'll try its best to replicate, write down the text of what it thinks the actual message is saying. If it gets it correct, you'll have this confidence section here. So you'll see a percentage sign. If the system thinks it's not that confident, we can listen back, and we can actually then, change around the text. So we can completely edit this area here as well, change the text to match what the actual speech is of that message we recorded, okay? Then once that's done, over on the right-hand side, we can go to tags and categories, and we can add tags and categories. And what that does then is that's going to add maybe, tags and categories are like topics as such, basically. So then when we add a tag or a category, we can have multiple greetings, as you can see from the screen, or multiple food and drinks. And then what we can do is we can just export those particular ones and create that topic based on greetings. So we might have a greetings topic, or we might even have a food and drinks topic. So much like what you see in this next particular screenshot here, we have phrases. And in this particular one, we have food and drink. And these are messages that we recorded. For example, I am hungry, I am thirsty, I would like some more, or even I am full now. So we can have those messages. So much like going back here, the title, my children, okay, that could be the button, that could be the text that's on the button, like hungry, thirsty, full, or more. And the text could say, for example, if I'm hungry, I am hungry. And the text only displays as the word hungry on the button itself. Okay, so that's how the message banking would work. And as I mentioned, if you want to learn more about that, obviously you can get in contact with yourselves again. And finally, I just want to talk about the voice banking. So as I mentioned, voice banking itself, if we want to do some voice banking, you can actually, it's available now as well on the TD Talk software, which I'm going to show you a snapshot of a while. And that also features the a cappella My Own Voice as well. So if you are recording your own voice and making it into the voice on TD Talk, you can do that through My Own Voice on a cappella. And that has launched 21st of June as well on ALS Awareness Day as well. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go out of the slides for a second. Just bear with me now before we have any questions. Okay. And what I'm going to do is just go into, just give you a quick view of the TD Talk. Okay, so TD Talk itself, okay, so I'm not going to actually be able to go into the software itself now because it's on iOS and I'm on a Windows device. So just to kind of give you a quick idea here, this is what the logo looks like, as I mentioned, I showed you a while ago. Okay, that's the TD Talk software. So TD Talk is the new text-based software that is available on iOS. If you have an iPad, it's actually a free software. So we can download that software for free from the iOS App Store. Down the line, it will be available on Windows, not yet, but it is going to be available on Windows. But at the moment, it is available on the App Store, as I mentioned. So you'll see here from the screen, we've got just a quick snapshot of what the TD Talk looks like. So here we have a keyboard. In the center, we've got the message window. So that's where our text is displayed. On the top, we just have quick phrases, quick predictive phrases, okay? The top right-hand corner where my mouse is at the moment, you've got a little phrase button. So we can store up to 9 phrases here. And the reason there's only 9 phrases is that in the message bar itself, if I'm actually typing a message, and I can go back and I'll show you the slide again in a while. When I was typing a while ago, when you saw that video of the TD Talk software, it actually starts after a while to predict what we're saying. So for example, if I was introducing myself to people every day and I was saying, my name is Michael, the more I type in, my name is Michael, the more the system is then going to recognize that after, I think it's two times of writing it, the third time it's going to remember what I said. So if I typed in my name is, it's going to just basically come in a lightly grayed out writing Michael. So then if I just look at the word, it'll automatically populate onto the software. So I don't have to worry about searching for that saved phrase. It's already going to auto-populate for me. You'll see also there's slight differences to maybe other softwares that you might have seen as well before. The delete button and the clear button are on opposite sides of the screen. And the reason being is to reduce the amount of accidental, hits of the wrong button. For example, we might just be deleting a letter, but we might accidentally delete the whole phrase. We don't want that to happen. So that's why it has been designed with the 2 of those buttons at different areas to stop and to reduce down the amount of times that may happen. And you've also, as I mentioned, got the keyboard. It's got lots of different languages on it as well. And here is the speak button as well. So we can have our phrase, and then when we want to speak, when we're ready to speak, we press the phrase or the speak button, and that will speak our phrase for us then as well. Okay. You'll also see as well, just the final kind of, I suppose, feature of this software as well. The message window, you might have seen in previous softwares as well, the message window would be at the top of the screen. The reason it is in the center of the screen is because for any eye gaze user, it's reducing down that fatigue and that eye travel. So if we have it up the top and we're looking at a keyboard down the bottom, there's constant up and down eye travel, whereas it's moved down to the center just above the keyboard to reduce that eye travel and reduce the fatigue for the eye gaze user as well. Okay. Again, if anyone wants to see that software in more detail, if you want to give us, get in contact with us, call us or email us. And as I mentioned, this particular these slides will be available afterwards as well. We can have more information on the TD Talk software as well. And if you want, again, we will be doing more, webinars on this, and we can always do the assessments and the trials as well.